All right. I think I'm live. Trying to figure out this live stream thing. I like to think I'm technically savvy, but you never know until things get technical. Morning, everyone. Matthew Kadish here from the Salty Nerd Podcast. We are trying to do a few more live streams on the podcast just to be able to interact with our audience a little bit more and get more content out there for you guys. And, it's a struggle because we're trying to figure out, what is it people want to see and what's going to be interesting and what's going to be fun. And, Matt Vader, he's doing video game live streams and all that good stuff. And I'm not, I am a gamer, but I'm not very good at video games. So watching me play video games probably isn't going to be a big thing. But I decided that I'm just going to try to wing it for a little while and throw a bunch of spaghetti on the wall, see what's going to stick. And if something hits, then maybe I'll do more of it. Who knows? But I wanted to welcome everyone who's in the chat. Joker Voice, welcome. It's good to see you here. Jimmy Vanderhorst, hi there. Judy Hops, is that a Doomcock signed photo base? Yes, that is a Doomcock autographed photo. When he launched his Patreon, I signed up for it. Support a creator I enjoy. And this was back before he was huge. And I became, he gives a title to his, patrons who support him because, they're part of his evil Legion of Evil or something like that. And when he asked me what I wanted to be, I told him I wanted to be the Minister of Naughty Thoughts. And so he officially made me the Center of the Earth's Minister of Naughty Thoughts. So if you have a naughty thought out there, I'm in control of you. So let's see here. Press Play Streaming Studios. Hello, friends. Oh, and you too, Vader, LOL. I don't think Vader's on here right now. It's just me. It's Kadish. It's the Kadish Show. Vader's not the only one who's allowed to live stream on the channel. Maybe I should actually call up these things as they come up so people have some type of reference. Prince Pumpkin. Hollywood has written strong female characters in the past. This is true. But it appears that a lot of new writers to Hollywood have trouble understanding what actually makes a strong character. That's kind of what the topic of today's live stream is going to be about, and I'm going to get to all that stuff in a little bit. We got Judy Hops. Welcome, Judy. LOL, that's a good title. Thank you. I like to think that I can come up with a good title every once in a while. Lightning strikes once in a while, so I'm glad that you like the title. Keely Chow. Hi, Salty Nerd Podcast. Hi, Keely. It's just 1/4 of the Salty Nerd Podcast this morning. I believe Alex is at work. Jude is at the gym. And Matt Vader is probably still asleep. I mean, who knows? But I'm thinking about doing a regular live stream in the mornings around 10 a.m. Pacific time, just to kind of get in the habit of doing it, see if it's something that I can sustain over the long term, because, we really enjoy doing the live streams and we want to engage with our audience more and get feedback from you guys. We've tried doing the Spaces thing while we're actually recording the podcast where, if you guys don't know about that, Twitter has this live chat feature called Spaces. And we've experimented with actually, streaming the podcast to that directly to Twitter while we're recording it on our recording days. And that's been pretty cool. We've gotten some people in there and we can actually bring in people from the Spaces chat onto the show and chit chat with them. And a lot of that stuff is for the patrons over at saltynerdclub.com. So that's been a lot of fun. And we're experimenting with some stuff. We're trying to see what's going to work, what isn't, what suits our style. It's a process. Joker Voice. Notebook and pen at the ready. Yeah, I'm going to be dropping some writing knowledge today. So Joker, if you're a writer, you're going to be having some fun here. All right, Judy Hobbs. Write a character that's strong, then make them female. Don't make them strong at a male's expense. Don't mistake strength for invincibility. Ripley bled, Sarah Connor bled, and both were scared. It's a very good point. I think a lot of what we're going to be focusing on in today's stream is what does it mean to be strong? Because I think a lot of writers, especially in Hollywood, don't truly understand what that means. And when we say strong character, it's so vague that people may not understand what goes into strength, writing a strong character. So we're going to cover a bunch of that stuff right now, but that's very good. Very good advice there, Judy. Are you a writer, Judy? Be interested to know that. Okay, Jamie Vanderhost. I think a man and I take away think of a man and I take away reason and accountability. That is a great line from was it that Jack Nicholson movie? Oh, I forget. It was the one with Helen Hunt, where Jack Nicholson plays a writer, and this woman comes up to him. She's a huge fan. She's like, "How do you write women so well?" And he's like, "I think of a man and I take away reason and accountability." It's a great line. I don't know if that's quite the best way to go about writing women, but it's a great line. Matt Vader, need me come rescue you? Yeah, dude, if you want to hop on. I'm on StreamYard, so I can bring you in, and you can join in on the fun. We're going to be talking about some news articles to begin with that have to do with strong female characters. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, talking about actually what goes into writing strong female characters. Because in case you guys didn't know, I'm a published author. So I might know a thing or two. I've got a blue check mark by my name, so I'm an authority on certain things. All right. Red Fox is now. Hi, all. Hello, Red Fox. Thanks for coming to the stream. Great reference, Jamie. Jack Nicholson. As good as it gets. That's what it was. As good as it gets, yes. Thank you, Judy, for pointing that out. That's great. Let's see here. Vader, I'm at the coffee shop. Well, I'm probably going to be streaming for a while. So if you want to hop on when you get home or whatever, if I'm still going, more than welcome to. I put the link in the group chat, so you can hit that up when and if you're ready. You don't have to hop on because we're going to be talking about some writing stuff. But if you want to add your 2 cents, you're always welcome. Joker, writing dabbler at the moment. Well, that's how we all start, just dabbling, and then we go right into not dabbling, doing it professionally right here. So, all we got to start somewhere. All right, Keely, I recommend having some special guests like Gary of Nerdrotic, Bird of Prey 5, and the guys at Bounding into Comics, and Tom Connors of Midnight's Edge After Dark. I'm good friends with Tom. I would love to have him on the stream. He's usually on like a billion different streams, so like I don't know if he'd have time for my little excursion into live streaming, but he's always welcome to come on. I don't know anyone at Bounding into Comics. I'm not familiar with Birdo Prey 5. If he's cool, welcome to have him on. Gary doesn't return my DMs. So I would love to have Gary on, but I think he's too big for little old me. Maybe I can get Doomcock to come on sometime. I mean, who knows? I would like. I'm talking to a few author friends of mine, like professional authors, about coming on and doing like a regular live stream, just talking about movies from a writing perspective. So like we'll watch a movie, and then we'll get on and we'll break down the writing and what was done right, what was done wrong. Because I always think it's interesting to get a perspective from people who are professional writers, because they kind of see things that most normal people don't, and they can break down why something works and why something doesn't a little bit more eloquently than like an average moviegoer. So I've got 2 authors right now that have committed to it. I'm looking for one more because I'd like to have a panel of 3. But that's going to be happening soon, so I'm looking forward to that. Press play. Wrote the Vader comment prior to opening the stream. Sorry. Oh, it's okay, man. I would expect Vader to be streamed. I mean, like, he's the only one who's been live streaming on the channel so far. So, like I said, this is something new I'm trying. It's just something that, I'm seeing that if it works, if people enjoy it, and we're going to have some fun today. It's a chill stream. I didn't plan anything out. I didn't really have any structure for today's stream or anything like that. So I'm just kind of winging it. And we're going to see if anyone, wants to wing it with me. Jimmy Vanderhorst, at Judy Hopps, good characterization of strong women. I'd like to add assertive, strong-willed, confident, isn't obnoxious, angry, stubborn, and arrogant. I think that's a good kind of take with assertive, strong-willed, confident. I don't know about obnoxious, angry, stubborn, and arrogant, though, because there are times where you want characters to be like that. It's just a question of, does making them like that annoy the audience? And you always, as a writer, and storyteller, you always have to keep your audience in mind. I think that's a big mistake a lot of Hollywood storytellers make, is that when they write for themselves, which, isn't a bad thing if you're catering to a very specific niche, or if you're just doing something, as a passion project or something like that. But if you're telling a story for an audience, you have to keep the audience in mind. So you can make a stubborn character, you can make an arrogant character, and they can be really fun. Like today, we just released our podcast on the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and Johnny Depp's Captain Jack Sparrow, he's incredibly arrogant and obnoxious, but he's also very endearing. So like, there are ways that you can go about taking negative traits and making them good traits for a character to have. It's just a question of how annoying they are to the audience. So like, if it's sometimes characters are meant to be annoying, or meant to be, characters that the audience doesn't like. So it's all about the intention behind the characters. So I don't necessarily agree, but I do know where you're coming from, Jamie. If a character is obnoxious or angry or stubborn or arrogant in a way that turns off the audience, like if it's a main character, then you're absolutely 100% right. But always keep in mind that storytelling is about intention and what you're communicating to the audience. So a skilled writer can actually make a character like that and either have them be purposefully off-putting or make them endearing in an interesting and unique way. Okay, Keeley, you can also have Scott of Sporking News podcast and author Stephen Walton. I'm not familiar with either of those two, but love to connect with them and see if they would be a good fit. Always looking to meet new people. That's one of the cool things about social media and the internet. I know there's a lot of toxicity out there, a lot of stuff where people, are more kind of concerned about drama and trolling people and flame wars and stuff like that. But it's also a great way to, meet people and create like new and interesting relationships. Like, for instance, Matt Vader and Alex of the Salty Nerd podcast, my co-hosts. I met them through Twitter. I met Alex on Twitter, and he met Vader through Twitter, and he introduced me to Vader. And so, like, without Twitter, we would have never met. And I think that that's really cool. A lot of people get kind of burnt out on social media, and I can see, the benefits of taking a break sometimes. But I personally really enjoy it because I spend most of my day in front of my computer, either writing or editing or what have you. So social media allows me to kind of, be social with other people and meet people and make new friends without having to leave the comfort of my home. So I really enjoy that. All right. Should a strong, independent woman have a jar of corks? Well, according to my lovely fiance, Jude, the answer to that would be yes. I don't know how independent she is right now, but she is a very strong woman. And I think you can judge the independence of a woman based off of how many wine bottles she kills on a daily basis. So yes, jar of corks. I would really love it if James Mangold would just put a jar of corks in the background somewhere in his Indiana Jones movie. I think that'd be really cool. I think that would be a nice little wink and a nod. So James, if you're listening, I know that you put a lot of importance on my opinion. Please put a jar of corks in the background of Indiana Jones 5. I think that would be fantastic. All right. Tila from Masters of the Universe Revelation is a whiny bitch. She is kind of whiny. I don't agree with a lot of the writing choices that they made with Tila for the Masters of the Universe reboot, cartoon, continuation, whatever it is. I don't really know. We're going to be talking about her a little bit in today's stream, about the choices they made with her and maybe what they could have done differently and things of that nature. And Joker voice, the Huntress from the Batman comics, very stubborn and arrogant, great character. Indeed, the Batverse has a lot of very interesting female characters, which the movies and TV shows seem to want to ruin. So, big difference. Although, from what I understand, I'm not as big into comics as I used to be. Like, I used to be heavy into comics. I was training to be a comic book artist. I had like a huge collection, in high school. Like I was a big comic book nerd in high school before it was cool to be a comic book nerd. Okay. I always do everything before it's cool. Kind of lost my train of thought there. The Batverse, with all their interesting female characters, TV and movies have really kind of gotten carried away with the messaging more than the characterization, because there is a lot you can do with characters like Catwoman, Huntress, Spoiler, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, stuff like that. But instead of making it natural, I know what I was going to say. I'm not a big follower of comics anymore, but from what I understand, just from browsing Twitter, there's a lot of stuff going on in the comic book industry right now. And I have a few friends who draw comics, so they kind of keep me up to date on some things. And it seems like comic books are slowly dying off, at least in terms of the major publishing, because Marvel, DC, all these big comic book companies are hiring awful writers who only care about political messaging as opposed to telling good stories. And all the good stories are in the Comicsgate arena, where it's independent creators putting out stuff meant to cater to an audience. And I hate the term Comicsgate because I just think it sounds stupid. It's confusing. So like you say Comicsgate to the average person, they're just like, what is that, like Watergate? What's the scandal? I wish they come up with a better term for it. But like if you look at that, the whole Comicsgate revolution is something where independent creators, artists, writers, stuff like that, they're putting out stuff meant to entice an audience, meant to cater to an audience, meant to speak to an audience, meant to entertain an audience, whereas the mainstream stuff now seems to be more geared towards, political propaganda, which I don't get, man. I don't get why companies do this to themselves, because the people that type of stuff would appeal to don't read and buy comic books. They don't. They watch TV and movies, which is why the TV and movies put that stuff out there. So, I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that one. Prince Pumpkin, a better question is why write female characters the way they do today? Because they're lazy and they're untalented and they don't know any better. One thing you got to understand about writers in Hollywood, and this goes for TV and movies both, is that anyone in Hollywood can be a writer. You don't have to go to school for it. You don't have to have a degree in writing. You don't have to have a track record. Like, you don't have to have a novel under your belt or whatever. You could be somebody's sister's cousin's boyfriend's roommate, and as long as like, how to do remedial English and string sentences on a piece of paper together, you can get a job as a writer. Everyone in Hollywood has a screenplay that they've written. Everyone, no exceptions. And that doesn't mean it's good. It just means that they know how to put words to a page. And so what often happens is you get people hired as writers who can put words on a page, but they don't understand the broader nuances of telling good stories. And this is why people write female characters the way they do in Hollywood. And we're going to talk about that once we get into the breakdown. Maybe I should stop doing chat, but I'm having a good time with chat. Get to this. Hey, Nick. I think with Tila, it's more that they didn't set up her backstory so that newcomers can understand her reaction. Yeah, I guess, I mean, like it's meant to, the Masters of the Universe was meant to be a continuation of the original series. So I think there was some assumption there that the people watching it would know. And they did kind of set stuff up a little bit in the first episode, but maybe they should have, gone into like a little bit more of the backstory. I mean, it's hard to say. I want to thank you, Nick, in particular, because I've got a new article coming out today on RT.com about Doctor Who and Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall stepping down that you gave me a lot of great insight with, and I definitely used some of your research in that article. So thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate it. It made my job a lot easier. Let's see here. Comicsgate is greater than DC and Marvel. Yes, Keeley. I would have to agree with you right now because the stuff coming out of DC and Marvel at the moment is not good, in my opinion. Not only in terms of the writing, but in terms of the art too. Like, I don't know where they're getting the artists for these comic books, but they just look terrible. Don't like it at all. Like when I was collecting comics, a big thing to me was the artwork. If like a comic book could have like a really stupid story, but if the art was cool, I'd be all over it. Like Spawn, for instance. Spawn was a stupid comic book, but I loved it because Todd McFarlane was a great artist. Judy, would a comic book writer be allowed to have a book now where a man hits a woman, i.e. the time Harley Quinn killed about 500 people, including kids, and those free explosive Nintendo DSs? Could Batman beat the crap out of her? I don't know. I think that that's a creative choice, but personally, I would say, yeah, you can do anything you want as long as you're willing to suffer the backlash for it. Because there will be people saying like, oh, violence against women. And in fact, like we'll talk a little bit about that, when we get into the writing strong female character stuff, because part of that is, being a strong female character, at least by Hollywood standards, is being able to take a punch, or beating up men who are like, 200 pounds heavier and 3 times their size. So we'll get to that in a bit. But I would say that comic book writers are allowed to do anything they want. It's just a question of whether the publisher will agree with it. Jamie, Joker voice, I agree. See, those character traits make him or her 3D human, but it shouldn't be the default. Those traits do not equal strong, which I think is a mistake quickly made nowadays. I'd have to agree with you on that. I think that there's like a playbook that Hollywood might go by to craft quote unquote strong female characters, or it's just like a checkbox. So yeah, like there's no hard and fast rule about how to write, female characters, but we are going to talk about what it is that makes characters strong. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Keeley, it's sad that Image is going the same way as DC and Marvel. Image was Comicsgate before Comicsgate. That's true. Image being the independent kind of comic book publisher. The only problem with Image was that the artists who went and started it weren't very good businessmen. So they've had their ups and downs over the years. But, these things go in cycles. Image, I think, is pretty corporate nowadays. So we'll see. Jedi Knight Lego, Ben will get this drywall butt kicked. We'll get his drywall butt kicked. Hello there, just popping in to say hi. Hope the stream goes well. Well, hello, Jedi Knight Lego Ben. Thanks for stopping in. Appreciate you being here and throwing in a chat in the comments. Hey guys, if you wouldn't mind, if you're in the chat, give the stream a thumbs up real quick. It just helps with the algorithm, helps get us out there. And if you're a fan of the channel and you watch our videos, always give us a thumbs up because it really helps YouTube get those engagement signals and pushes our videos out to more people. So, we're still a small channel, like we're about 1,800 subscribers. Ideally, we would love to get to the point where the channel is bringing in enough money where Matt Vader and Alex can both quit their day jobs and just focus full time. Right now, because I work from home and I'm, I make my money writing books. I'm the only one working on the podcast full time, so it would be great to have Alex and Matt, with me on this journey to pick up some of the slack. But they got day jobs, so just giving us a thumbs up helps out a lot. So if you guys could all do that right now, that'd be fantastic. Red Fox says, now I buy and read comics for the art. It annoys me that the industry has a tendency to treat artists as interchangeable. They're not. This is very true. I know a lot of comic book artists just through my going to Comic Cons and stuff like that, becoming friends with them. And people feel like they're entitled to an artist's work. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but a lot of people don't appreciate the kind of time and effort that goes into making art. And they just feel like, oh, like, could you draw me like a entire graphic novel? I'll give you $5, So there is a lack of respect for artists in the comic book field, but the good ones usually rise to the top. Judy Hops, I don't mean to insult you, by the way, but if you're willing to gain another 200 pounds and add a nose ring and stop smiling, you'd be the perfect casting for Starfire's daughter. Hey, anything to break into the business. I'll gain 200 pounds, add a nose ring, and stop smiling. In fact, right now, I will say I now identify as Starfire's daughter. So I'll put the pronouns in my bio. All right, guys. So, I spent a good amount of time just going through the comments. Thank you all so much for coming in and interacting with me in chat. Please feel free to stick around because we're going to be talking about some stuff right here in a minute. But before we get into the actual writing creative part, real quick, I just want to touch on something that has to do with strong female characters. And that is these news stories that have come out within the past day or so about Scarlett Johansson and her role as Black Widow. And as you can see here, we got this article from Variety. Let me blow it up for you. And it basically talks about how Scarlett Johansson is suing Disney for breach of contract over the Black Widow release method. And I find this kind of inside baseball stuff very interesting because this is Scarlett Johansson basically saying like, hey, I'm not ever going to care about making another Disney movie in my lifetime. I mean, she's basically going to war with the studio over this, or at least her people are. But what's interesting about this is that, so like when her contract for this movie was created, this was before COVID, this was before the rise to prominence of streaming services and stuff of that nature. And the contract that she had by the time the movie actually came out was a little bit outdated, because like I said, it was crafted way before any of this stuff actually happened. And what the lawsuit's basically about is that a lot of her bonuses and salary kind of incentives were tied to the box office performance of Black Widow. And this is something that, is pretty standard in most Hollywood contracts where, if a movie makes $1 billion at the box office, the people who star in that movie usually get a cut, and, it's a lot of money. And if they hit certain benchmarks, they get more money. So this is a pretty standard practice. But what happened is because Marvel had to push this movie back, and they decided to release it concurrently on their streaming service, Disney Plus, at the same time it was coming out in theaters, Scarlett's people are arguing that they cost the movie theatrical revenue that in turn prevented them from hitting certain benchmarks, and Scarlett didn't get, the money that she was owed. And this is actually something that's been going on in Hollywood for the past year after, like a lot of these studios launched their streaming services and decided to release their movies over here on their own streamers. And what's interesting about that is that, you have companies like HBO Max who, basically said like, we're releasing all of our stuff on streaming in addition to the theaters. It was a big gamble, Not sure if it's paying off for them. But one of the interesting things about releasing these big movies onto their streaming services is that it's actually more profitable for them to do that than to put it out into theaters, because with theaters you have print costs where you have to print like the film reels or digitally deliver the files and send them out there. You have to have security for that, shipping, insurance, licensing. And, you have to split that cost or the revenue from those movies with the theater owners. So, the studios don't get 100% of the profits from the box office. Those are shared with the exhibitors. But on streaming, if they release it to their own streaming service, they get to keep 100% of the profits. So even if a movie doesn't make a whole lot of money on the streaming service, it could be more profitable than its theatrical version, simply due to the fact that the studios get to keep 100% of the revenue that it generates. And in terms of these subscription services, that revenue compounds over time, because if you have a big release like Black Widow, that could get more people to sign up for the streaming service, which means that depending on the metrics, most people will stay subscribed anywhere from 3 months to a year. And that compounds over the course of time, and that can lead to more revenue for the studio than just simply putting something out there in the theaters. But I know Warner Brothers had to go back and renegotiate with a lot of big name stars when they made the decision to release their stuff on streaming on the same day as theatrical, because a lot of the stars' contracts were tied to the back end profits. And Scarlett Johansson, in particular, it seems like she was unhappy with the amount of money she made. Now, here's another article that's kind of the same with this. So her representation, CAA, which is her talent agency, was not too happy that Disney released her salary. Disney came out and basically said that she made $20 million for Black Widow. Stop complaining. But they're estimating that she lost about $50 million in back-end bonuses and revenue because of the decision to put it out on Disney Plus the same day that it was released in theaters, which is a lot of money. Like if I was out $50 million, I'd probably be suing too. But a lot of the talent agencies in Hollywood are very unhappy with the studios right now and their business model. So this is basically Scarlett Johansson saying that I'm not returning as Black Widow. I'm not doing another Marvel movie. I'm done with this. I want my money and I'm moving on. Because, I mean, lawsuits like this, they don't really endear actors to studios. Like if you ever watched that show Entourage, there was a great kind of story sequence where Vince wanted to go off and make a movie about Pablo Escobar, and he had just made Aquaman for Warner Brothers with James Cameron, and the studio head didn't want him to go off and do a movie about a murdering drug cartel head when he's like the face of this big superhero franchise. And Vince kind of like told this guy to screw off, and he went and did the movie anyway, and the studio head squashed the movie and really made life miserable for him. And this is the type of thing that can happen in Hollywood, especially like if you piss off Disney, which is like the biggest studio in the world at the moment. So I guess the risk reward for this thing is that, Scarlett wants her $50 million. And if she ends up getting it or getting something in return, Disney is probably not going to be using her in any of her future movies. But since Black Widow is a perfect example of a strong female character, and I don't mean a perfect example of a strong female, I mean, this is what Hollywood believes is a strong female character looks like. I wanted to include just talking about this very briefly because I know that there's a lot of criticism about how Disney handled this, where it came out way too late in the greater Marvel universe. Like this should have really come out after Civil War. They should have made this like years ago. And just the way that she was portrayed in this movie, her headlining stuff. And so I find it interesting. I actually liked Black Widow when I watched it. I thought it was a pretty average Marvel movie, but it was entertaining. It was good for what it was. And a lot of the criticisms that people had, yeah, okay, but I still enjoyed it. It's better than Captain Marvel, which is another strong female character that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But before we do, I wanted to talk about Masters of the Universe real quick. So I wrote this article yesterday, not yesterday, 2 days ago, a couple days ago, July 26th, whenever that was. And for those of you who don't know, I write op-eds for RT.com, international news site. They are state-sponsored Russian media, but in my experience with them, they've always been on the up and up. Like they never come to me and be like, "Hey, can you write an article bashing like this person or that person or this thing and that thing?" Like they're all very kind of just straight up like newsy stuff. So like if I go to them, I'm like, "Hey, I'd like to write an article about He-Man," they're like, "What do you have in mind?" And I'll pitch them the article, and they'll say yay or nay based off of whether or not they think that my pitch is interesting or not. So like I'm not being controlled by Putin, or I'm not Russian bot or anything. It's just so happens that this international news site, which is big pretty much all over the world except for the United States, because we got CNN over here, they like what I have to say, and they publish my stuff. So very grateful to them for that. But I wrote this article talking about Masters of the Wokeverse. And it kind of touches on Kevin Smith's Masters of the Universe reboot. If those of you who follow me on Twitter and those of you who watch the Salty Nerd podcast, you'll know that I'm not too harsh on this cartoon because I actually really enjoyed it. And, I grew up a He-Man fan and stuff like that. I didn't agree with all the creative choices that they made, but I understood what they were going for. And I think a lot of our criticisms might be addressed in the back 5 episodes of this series. They might not be, who's to say? But the first 5 episodes definitely had a few problems with them, and I can certainly understand why certain people feel like this was anti-male, anti-He-Man, SJW garbage. And I kind of talk about the reasons why that is in this article. If you guys haven't read this, just type in, my name, Matthew Kadish, and He-Man, and I'm sure it'll pop up in Google. But the actual kind of focus of this article is on Netflix and why everything that Netflix makes in terms of original movies and original TV series is has this forced diversity in it. And this goes towards what we consider strong female characters, which we're going to be talking about. And basically, Netflix has a executive in their upper echelons who's in charge of diversity and representation in their stuff. So it's not only about hiring and diversity hires in Netflix as the corporation, but it's making sure that certain types of demographics are represented in their original stuff. And if you look at all of Netflix's original offerings, they have a very almost comical track record of including underrepresented minorities into their stuff, whether it makes sense to do that or not. Pretty much every original series and movie that Netflix puts out, it's got to have like a gay character or a non-binary character or something, whether or not it makes sense to put it into the story. And I can see that like a lot of this was one of the reasons why the cartoon He-Man turned out the way it did, which is basically Netflix came and mandated, hey, can you put more Black characters in there? Can you put more focus on women in there? Blah, blah, blah. And Kevin Smith was probably like, sure, why not? You're paying me. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the criticisms that people have of this series were an outgrowth of Netflix's mandates, because a lot of the stuff that Netflix puts out it's mandated that certain things happen, and they're really big on female-led properties. They're really big on putting in people of color in their properties. They're really big on LGBTQ representation. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, at least in my opinion. But it's when that stuff takes away from the story, when it becomes a detriment to the tale that's being told, that's when things get kind of iffy, because people come to these TV and movie properties to get away from the BS of everyday life. They want to be entertained. They want to turn their brain off. And when you inject this political messaging into your entertainment, and not in a fun, subtle way like how vintage Star Trek used to do it, but when they beat you over the head with it, it takes you out of that, and it ruins your enjoyment. And I think that that's one of the things that modern Hollywood does the worst, is that most writers and storytellers in Hollywood nowadays are more akin to political propagandists than they are actual storytellers. And that's a big problem. And so let's talk about this stuff and kind of get down to some nitty gritty type things. Talk about what it takes to write a strong female character. And I'm going to attempt to pull a Devin Nash and kind of share my word pad here, my notepad, trusty notepad, as we talk about some of this stuff. So I don't know if you guys can see that. It's probably too small right now, but we're going to do strong female characters. And what's interesting is, as a writer, this is kind of part of my process here, where a lot of my stuff starts with a notepad file, and it's just stuff where I'll start typing things and brainstorming things and cutting and pasting things, and it's a way to kind of organize my thoughts so that by the time I open up my Microsoft Word document and I'm ready to actually start writing, I have like a nice little notepad reference type thing going on here. So let me see if I can get rid of this. But before I do, today's stream was really inspired by this tweet I put out called, "Which do you prefer in a movie, strong male lead or strong female lead?" And this is just one of those throwaway tweets that I put out there that kind of blew up. And 99% of the responses I got to this tweet were from people saying, like, that doesn't matter. I just want a good story. I want a strong main character. And so that was kind of the thing that inspired me to do this. The topic of the stream today was so many responses saying, like, hey, I just want a strong character. And so that got me thinking, what does it mean to have a strong character? What does it mean to have a strong female lead? Because so many quote unquote strong female characters are done poorly or done incorrectly by the establishment in Hollywood. So we're going to minimize that so that we can put a little bit more focus on the notepad. And if you guys have any questions as I'm going along, or you have something you want to chime in with to add to the conversation, please feel free to do so in the chat. I've got it up here. So I'll try to be a little bit more cognizant of what's going on as I'm talking about this. So I don't really have like a lesson plan prepared. So I'm just kind of going to wing it on this. But let me ask you guys, what do you think makes a strong character? Like, how would you define a strong character to you? What are the traits that strong characters have? I think one of the things that we need to answer before we really get going is, what does strong mean? Right? What is it that makes a character strong? Now, in most of Hollywood lexicon, people believe that a strong female character is basically a male character with female body parts, female genitalia. Like, you could literally swap out that character for a man and not have to change any of the dialogue, any of the action, nothing. They're interchangeable, because basically a strong woman has to basically be a man, at least in Hollywood's, vision of things. So like if you look at all the really bad strong female characters out there, they're basically just men with boobs who are going around fighting. They're usually lesbians, so like, they even have like a female love interest and all that stuff. So it's one of those things where Hollywood just basically believes that in order to be strong, you have to be masculine, you have to be male. And I don't think that that's correct. There are a lot of weak men out there. There are a lot of beta men. There are a lot of male characters that are not strong. And yet we feel that we have to give female characters masculine traits in order to, quote unquote, make them strong, which I feel is incorrect. One of the interesting things about crafting a female character versus crafting a male character is that you can explore the differences between them. You can put into the story things that are uniquely feminine. And I like to kind of point to Legally Blonde, the movie Legally Blonde, when I talk about this, because that's a movie with a strong female character, main character, who's uniquely female. Like she is, she's so kind of like ditzy and blonde and feminine and girly and stuff like that, that even the people in the movie underestimate her. But when, the cards are on the table, she is smart and capable, and she's the hero of the story. And you end up not only liking her, but really admiring her. And so that's a great example of like a really strong female character. You'll have to excuse me for a minute. I have to play my Star Wars game real quick while I'm on here. I play a couple mobile games, and I have to log in at certain times in order to get energy to play the game later on in the day. So I have like my timer set. Vader knows all about it. He can probably tell you about it in the chat. Let's see here. Who was it that said courage isn't a lack of fear, but having fear and fighting through it? I believe that was Ned Stark. I mean, I honestly don't know, but it's kind of like an old ism. Like courage is feeling fear, but pushing through it anyway. Because like, is it really courage if you're not afraid? That not feeling fear doesn't take anything, right? The character is an individual. So that Red Fox, is that your definition of being strong? Is that they're an individual? Joker always flaws, growth over the adventure, lessons learned, and failure. I sort of agree with that. That's more of a character growth thing. What we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about strength. And I'm going to kind of talk about what it takes to write a female character. One of the interesting things that I went through when I was in film school was that when we were in our screenwriting classes, we had to read other people's screenplays. And I could always tell when it was some dude writing a story about a female main character, because the female main character didn't feel authentic when I was reading it. That's because the person writing the female character wasn't female and they didn't understand women. And so it came off as fake. That's the best way I could describe it. And I think that this is something that is kind of endemic in bad writing, is that a good writer can get into the head of a character and understand where they're coming from and actually become that character. A lot of writing is actually acting, but it's mental acting. It's embodying the character. And so like when I write female characters, I try to become that character in my head, and I try to understand where they're coming from and what their motivations are and things of that nature. And it can get very exhausting sometimes. Like, just ask any writer, after an hour of writing, you're exhausted because you put so much mental effort into that type of thing. But yeah, when I was in film school, lots of guys who would write female characters would write them very poorly because, like I said, they didn't understand that. And this goes to women writers too. You could, like when a female writer writes a male character, you can tell whether or not that woman understands men or not based off of how well they write that character. And I would actually say that, like, if 9 out of 10 men were very bad at writing female main characters in film school, maybe like 7 out of 10 women were really bad about writing male characters, because I don't know why it is, but women just tend to write men a little bit better on the average. I guess because, like, they're more empathetic and they kind of understand, or not everyone understands men, but on average, female writers are a little bit more inclined to understand male characters than male authors are inclined to understand female characters. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. That's just been my experience, is that on average, female writers do better writing male characters than male writers do with writing female characters. Oftentimes, male writers will write female characters just like they'll write male characters. They'll just say, oh, this person's female, and that's that. So this is kind of like the genesis of the bad writing habit, I guess you could say, in Hollywood, is that you have a lot of untrained, poor writers who don't understand the character that they're writing about. And I'll reference Rey Skywalker, or Rey Palpatine, whatever you want to call her, from the new Star Wars movies. And I always find it funny that, like, if you criticize Rey, you're a misogynist because Rey's a female character. But she was a female character written by 2 different white dudes who don't seem to understand what it takes to write a female character. She was created by J.J. Abrams. He wrote her for 2 movies. I guess you could say three white dudes if you count Chris Terrio, who co-wrote Rise of Skywalker with J.J. And then you have Rian Johnson. And, it's weird because, Rian Johnson, he's written interesting characters and other stuff before. Knives Out had a ton of female characters that I thought were very interesting and well done. But this is kind of typical of bad writing, is that you have someone who's doesn't understand the character. And I think that if people took the time to actually, like, flesh out a character's backstory and get into the head of that character and really understand their motivations and things of that nature, a lot of these problems would kind of, like, resolve themselves. So let's get back to talking about what does strong mean? What makes a strong character? So the default thinking in Hollywood and most bad writers is that strength equates to physical strength, right? If you're a strong, quote unquote, strong character, you're someone who can jump into a group of 10 to 20 guys and kick their butts, punch, kick, backflip, John Woo action style stuff. And this is what you see in Hollywood a lot. You see this with Atomic Blonde. You see this with, Rey Skywalker. You see this with, Terminator Woke Fate, all this stuff where you have women who are basically just kicking the butts of people twice their size. And that's physical. It's physical strength. And people think, oh, well, if this 90-pound woman can kick butt, then she's instantly a strong female character. But that's not necessarily true, right? I'm not saying women are incapable of fighting bigger, stronger guys. What I'm saying is that being able to physically dominate opponents isn't a good representation of what a strong character is, okay? Physical strength is an aspect of a character. It's not defining of them as a character. So when you write characters who are really good at action, you're not making them strong. You're just kind of giving them a skill set, right? That's a part of the greater mosaic of that character. If you look at, on the podcast where we reviewed this TV show called Shadow and Bone on Netflix, and in that show, there was a character who was a female, kind of like an assassin. She had a code that, she didn't want to kill, and she was very religious, but she was like really good at like throwing knives and kicking butt and stuff like that. And eventually throughout the show, like she chose to kill to save someone that she cared about. And, so like her strength, her ability to dominate an opponent, to, kill or beat up someone or like whatever, that was an aspect of her character, but that wasn't the thing that made her strong. What was interesting about her, and what in my opinion made her a strong female character, was that she had this code where she like refused to take a life, and she was constantly faced with situations where she was given the choice to either take a life or suffer a consequence, and she would usually suffer the consequence until it came to the point where it was life or death for someone she cared about, and she chose to kill to save that person. And then that affected her for the rest of the show. And to me, that was something that was interesting, that made her three-dimensional, that made her a strong character, because strength isn't just physical strength, right? Strength is about overcoming obstacles and dealing with challenges. And to me, that is actually what a strong character equates to, is strength equals overcoming obstacles. Okay. And the reason that I would use this definition as opposed to something like physical strength or mental strength or strength of character or something like that is that those things are kind of like situational, I guess you could say. You could have one character who's not mentally strong, but very physically strong. You could have one character who's very mentally strong, but morally very weak. But when it comes to strong characters, a character is only as strong as the obstacle in which they're facing. And if they can't overcome that obstacle, then they're weak. But if they can overcome that obstacle, they're strong. And if you look at all the best characters throughout cinema history, it's not so much that they can kick butt. It's that when they're faced with overwhelming odds, they find a way to overcome them. And that's what makes them strong. And so, like, you have situations like, for instance, Ripley from the Alien saga, right? Classic example of a strong female character. Like when you say strong female character, Ripley is like at the top of the list of who you think of when you think of like a strong female character. And the reason for that isn't because like she was running around kicking the ass of every alien, in the vicinity. It was because whenever she was faced with overwhelming obstacles, she found a way to overcome them and come out victorious. Same thing can be said for, I forget her name, the girl from Legally Blonde. Chat, help me out here. What was the Legally Blonde lady, the actress and the character's name? Matt Vader. I'm trying to make my notepad size larger. Let me see if I can figure it out. Okay, I got to zoom in. Zoom in. Zoom in. Zoom in. Let's see if this helps. Here, zoom in. I don't know how far I can zoom in on this. Yeah, how's that? Is that better? You can actually see what I'm typing for a change. Okay. Keely Chow, L. Woods, thank you. Played by Reese Witherspoon. Thank you, Joker. Thank you, Keely. I appreciate that. All right. So, that's a character who, isn't very physically strong. She can't kick the butt of 1,000 ninjas, but she's a strong female character. And that's because, if you look at that movie, everyone always underestimates her and puts her in these situations where she has to basically overcome these obstacles, and she continues to do so to the point where everyone around her is like, whoa, we really underestimated this woman. So I think that Elle Wood is a perfect example of a strong female character. Like, she's up there with Ellen Ripley, in my opinion. And if you look at what it means to overcome obstacles, sometimes it's basically like the character is presented with an obstacle and they're like, okay, how do I meet this challenge? And other times characters are presented with a choice, a dilemma of a certain type. So we'll say, come back over here, my super duper zoomed in notepad, and say, so they're presented with obstacles. They're also presented with dilemmas. And a dilemma is just a type of obstacle, but it's not like a physical obstacle. It's a choice, right? And this is where content of character comes into play, because, you know, at the end of Aliens, Ripley has the choice to escape or, you know, go rescue Newt, right? And she chooses to put her life on the line to go and rescue this child that she's grown attached to. And that's something that's courageous. And so instead of running away from an obstacle, she chooses to confront the obstacle. And that shows that she's got mental strength, and she's got courage, which is a type of fortitude, which is a type of strength. So it is through obstacles that true strength of character is presented to the audience, right? Because if you have someone who sees an overwhelming force and runs away, that tells you a lot about their character, that they don't have, that they're not a strong character, they're a weak character because they chose to run away. But then you have someone like Captain America who sees Thanos' entire army and he puts his shield back on. He's like, you know, I can do this all day. And he like faces off, even though failure is all but inevitable, he's willing to stand and fight, because not because he's strong and not because he's going to win, but because the fortitude that he has, the courage in his heart, the belief in fighting for what's right, even if that fight means that you're ultimately going to lose, that's what drives him. And that's what makes him such an intriguing, strong character, right? So what a lot of Hollywood doesn't understand is that strength is not about how much butt you can kick or how many explosions you can outrun. Like if you look at Black Widow, that entire third act where, you know, she's on that thing that's fallen from the sky and she's like skydiving and fighting with, you know, batons and stuff like that. That's all well and good, right? But that does not equate to a strong character. What equates to a strong character is, you know, doing something that they know is going to kill them because it's the right thing to do. It's about figuring out a way out of an impossible situation. It's about confronting these obstacles. And the obstacles don't have to be life or death. They can be normal, everyday obstacles where it's like, you know, you could have a character whose ex-husband doesn't want to give her custody of her kids. You know, you can have a main character who's struggling with addiction. These are all forms of obstacles that characters have to face and overcome in order to be strong. And sometimes just willing to deal with an obstacle can make a character stronger. And it's overcoming adversity and overcoming obstacles that make people admire characters, right? Because if you have a character that fails constantly, you don't like them. But if they fail trying really hard to win, then you admire them, right? So like a great example of this is Indiana Jones. Vader, I know that you love Indiana Jones. I love Indiana Jones. But if you look at every Indiana Jones movie, he's constantly failing, right? He's getting outsmarted. He's getting outmaneuvered. He's getting captured. His friends are getting captured, stuff like that. Every plan he has kind of goes awry, but he works really, really hard to win. And so when he comes up just a little bit short of winning, and he ends up losing, like we're rooting for him because he's trying so hard. And when he comes up short, we're just like, darn it. and that endears us to him. And this is one of the reasons why Indy is such an iconic character, is because it's not because, you know, he's played by Harrison Ford and he's like the best archaeologist ever. It's because he tries really, really hard to win, and he always just comes up a little bit short until the very end, where he ultimately succeeds. And by that point, you're rooting for him to win so hard that you rejoice when he does. And Indiana Jones is a great example of someone who constantly confronts obstacles and figures out ways to overcome them, even if he ultimately fails at overcoming the important obstacle. He tries really hard to do so. And that willingness to continue to always fight to succeed is also a form of strength. And that's what creates strong characters. So the whole point that I'm trying to make here is that in Hollywood parlance, a strong female character is a character who is all about kicking butt physically, right? And in addition to that, they're kind of made automatically good at everything, because they think that in order to be strong, you have to be competent at everything you do, right? So let's see here, the Hollywood fallacy of strong women is that they're physically superior, basically men, and they're instantly good at everything. This is a big problem with the way J.J. Abrams writes women, right? Where like they're just instantly amazing at everything, whether they earn that or not. And this kind of goes towards character development. It kind of goes towards lazy writing, because J.J. Abrams is an extremely lazy writer. But you know, a lot of the Hollywood fallacy of strong female characters is making them superior to everyone else in the story, whether it be, you know, cracking a joke or beating people up or just showcasing their skill set, what have you. They're essentially a Mary Sue. And for those of you who don't know what a Mary Sue is, it's a character that is a writer self-insert that is instantly good at everything and is better than every other character in the story. And to a lot of bad Hollywood writers, that's what a strong female character is a Mary Sue. I actually wrote a big article at this on my Medium account. And if you want to go check that out, I will see here, .com/@ you can go to this URL. I have a lot of kind of like film criticism articles on my Medium account, and there's one where I talk about Rey and whether or not she's a Mary Sue and whether or not it's sexist to think that she is. And I go into excruciating detail about what a Mary Sue is in that article, and, you know, my case for why Rey is a Mary Sue and all this other stuff. But that can, a lot of the points I make in that article could apply to pretty much any strong female character that Hollywood churns out for the most part. And it's something, it's kind of a telltale sign of an inexperienced writer to create Mary Sue characters, or in the case of men, Gary Stu characters, because male characters are not immune to the whole, you know, perfect character fallacy. But in the rise of kind of like bringing women to the forefront and putting more emphasis on female characters, are you guys still getting my stream? I think I might have dropped out there for a minute. Seeing some connection issues. Okay. Anyway, hopefully I'm still streaming. You guys can still hear me. Kind of lost my train of thought here. But it's kind of a telltale sign of inexperienced writers to make characters so good and so competent and so perfect that there's nothing at stake for them. There's no real challenge out there. Like when I was watching the Star Wars prequels, at no point did I ever feel like Rey was in danger because she could overcome any obstacle, right? And that kind of sucks a lot of the tension out of the story. Oftentimes, when you're watching a movie, the main characters, you know that they're not going to die, right? So where does the drama come from? Well, the drama comes from them being faced with an impossible obstacle and being like, how are they going to beat that obstacle, right? How are they going to display their strength? And that's one of the showcases of a good character, because when you watch an Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones isn't going to die. Like, he's not going to get killed in his own movie. But when you see him, chasing down a truck with the Ark of the Covenant in the back and it's filled with Nazi soldiers, you're like, how is he going to get that thing back? And the fun and the tension and the drama comes from watching him, confront that obstacle and come out on top. And so when you have a situation like the Star Wars prequels, where you have this main character, Rey, who's supposed to be a strong female character, she's supposed to be an inspiration for young women and a feminist icon and all this other stuff. When you see her faced with an obstacle, you're not wondering, oh, how is she going to overcome this in a fun and interesting way? You're looking at it as, oh, what's the laziest way the writers could come up with to get her to overcome this thing? Like she's a character. They never set up her flying background, and the minute she gets behind the wheel of the Millennium Falcon, she's triple killing TIE fighters. She's flying like she's been training to do so her entire life. No setup for that whatsoever. When she's confronted with Snoke, and he's got her at his mercy, you're not scared that she's going to suffer any consequences from that. And she didn't even do anything to get herself out of that situation. That was Kylo Ren. So like, just time after time again, whenever she's confronted with an obstacle, it's not really an obstacle for her to overcome. And that's one of the big telltale signs of a bad character, is that stuff is too easy for them. To give a female character vulnerability, to give a female character challenges that make her work and struggle, that doesn't weaken a character. That adds dimension to a character. That makes them more interesting, because we tend to relate to other people not based off their strength, but based off their flaws. I don't know if that makes sense, but everyone has flaws, and we always kind of focus more on the things we don't like about ourselves than the things that we do like about ourselves. And so, like, for instance, like, I'm a fat guy, right? I got a little extra cushion for the pushing right here on the beer belly. And to me, I've always been overweight ever since I was a kid. And so I hate the fact that I've always been fat. I'd like to be buff and muscular and thin and trim and all this other stuff. And so when I see another fat person, I can relate. I'm like, yeah, dude, you're fat too. I feel you. I know your pain. And so, I tend to be a little bit more sympathetic to people who are overweight than people who are not overweight. And that's just because of my experience in being fat. And so flaws are things that everyone can relate to. So like, we all feel ugly sometimes. We all feel stupid sometimes. We all feel incompetent sometimes. And so when we see characters display these things, that allows us to connect with them, because we can feel their pain. We can share in their insecurity. Now, when you let those things define a character, that's a bad thing, because that makes the character unlikable, because we don't want to invest in a character that is completely bad, just completely insecure and all this other stuff. Completely flawed, I guess I should say. But there's this notion that strong female characters can't have any flaws. They can't have any vulnerability. A great example of this is Tila from Masters of the Universe, where the story literally starts off with her being promoted to the man-at-arms for the king and queen, basically the top general of the entire Eternian army. Like she's taken over for her surrogate father, and she is the most skilled fighter in all the land who is not He-Man, right? That's how the movie starts. And the minute that they get to the point where she could be vulnerable, where she feels betrayed, where she feels like everyone that she ever cared about lied to her, where she finds out that the man that she admired and loved, He-Man, was not who she thought he was. That could have been a great kind of like showcase of her vulnerability, her flaws. But instead, she comes off as whiny and petulant and bratty because she makes it all about herself, right? Prince Adam just died saving the entire universe, but he lied to me. I'm the important one. That makes her selfish. Now, we can all be selfish at some point in time, but that is not a trait that we want to identify with, right? And I think that's one of the things that really turned people off about Tila when they were watching Masters of the Universe. So it's one of those things that you have to be aware of, is that certain negative traits, certain vulnerabilities are not things that people can relate to. And also when it comes to being strong and being good at something, you run the risk of people resenting that. It's kind of funny because like when I look at someone who's successful, whether they be like, successful financially or successful in relationships or successful in their career or whatever, I see that as an inspiration. I see that as like, wow, they achieved that. Maybe I could too. I want to do what they did. And so I strive to learn from them and figure out how to be more like them. But what happens oftentimes is a lot of people, they'll see someone's success and they'll be jealous of it. And they'll be like, hey, I want to tear that person down to my level because I don't think I could ever achieve that. And this happens with fictional characters as well. When you have a character who's perfect, right, who's good at everything, audiences will resent them because they're like, I can't relate to this character and I don't want them to be that successful. And so like you'll get situations where you have these quote unquote perfect characters and they create legions of rage bait haters amongst the fan base simply because there's nothing to like about them. There's nothing to admire about them. Everything comes easy to them. They didn't earn that ability to wield a lightsaber or do a Jedi mind trick or something like that. And that's one of the reasons why these characters are so widely criticized. It's not because they're female. It's because they didn't earn what they got. It was given to them. And it was usually given to them by a bad writer who's an old white guy. Let that sink in for a minute. The next time someone says, oh, you don't like this character because it's a woman, ask them, well, who wrote that character? Was it an old white dude? Young white dude? You have to keep asking these questions because like that character is not actually female. That character doesn't actually exist. The actress portraying that character is not actually that character, right? She is speaking lines and doing actions that a man crafted for her. And so when someone says that you're sexist for not liking Rey or not liking another strong female character, you have to be like, well, is it sexist to not like a character that was created by a man? Right? Like that's the mental gymnastics you have to put into it. And I kind of want to get away from this gender politics thing where whether it's a woman writing a story or a man writing a story, the gender of the writer doesn't matter. It's the level of skill that matters. It's the believability of the characters they create. It's the storyline that they craft. It's whether or not it's something that engages the audience and makes the audience want to continue along this journey with them. So this is the crux of the issue right here when it comes to writing strong female characters, is that bad Hollywood writers don't understand what strength really means. Strength is all about the obstacles that are presented to the character and how they choose to overcome them. That's how we can define a strong character, right? The greater the obstacle, the more strength is required to overcome it. And strength can be physical, mental, emotional, all this other stuff. It doesn't have to be shoehorned into a specific kind of category. Strength is all about facing an obstacle and figuring out a way over, under, or around it, or through it. They can be, these obstacles can be anything from an army of ninjas to, a simple choice between going on a date or something like that. Like, moral dilemmas, choices, all this stuff goes towards illustrating the strength of a character. And so when other writers out there are crafting a main character, you always want to think about, okay, what obstacles am I going to be presenting this character, and how can they believably overcome them? And how can I jack those obstacles up to the point where there is drama in figuring out how they're going to overcome them? One of the interesting things about the feedback I get from my books, particularly my Earthman Jack series, is I get a lot of readers who tell me, like, oh, Jack was put in this situation. I had no idea how he was going to get out of it. And then when he did, I was so surprised because, like, I didn't see, like, I couldn't predict how he was going to do that, but it makes total sense now that, like, I've read the chapter, like, whatever. And so that is the type of thing that audiences really respond to, even though, like, oh, the character's safe, he's not going to die. Seeing how he chooses to overcome the obstacle and display his strength or her strength is a big part of that audience participation. So that's a really important thing to be aware of in writing or crafting storytelling or even critiquing other stories, is you look at the situations that these characters are put into and you look at, like, how do they overcome them? And is it believable how they overcame them? And is there a better way that they could have overcome them? And this is all the stuff that, like, as a storyteller, you're constantly thinking about as you're watching a movie or a TV show. It's like, it's not, oh, I would have done this better. It's, what's the situation? What were the choices that were made? Were those choices correct? How could those choices have been made better? And in Hollywood, a lot of people just don't think about what they're writing. Like, they'll spend months writing a screenplay. They'll spend years writing a screenplay, but they won't spend 2 seconds sitting down and actually thinking about their story. It's kind of like the inexperienced writers' greatest weakness is they're trying to think what happens next, as opposed to, like, what should be happening overall, taking the meta look at stuff. This is one of the reasons I really like outlining, is because when you outline a story, you can sit there and you can figure out all the major points, and you can see, like, the flaws in your story, and you can go back and fix them and stuff like that. And people who just write, from start to finish, they may not see some of these flaws. And by the time you get to the end, you have a story that doesn't make any sense, but it's a finished story. And sometimes that's good enough for Hollywood. Reading comprehension in Hollywood is very low. A lot of people don't even read the scripts. I can remember one time I met Brent Spiner, the guy who plays Data on Star Trek. And I wanted to give him a copy of my book, Earthman Jack versus the Ghost Planet. And, I was just a fan. I said, Mr. Spiner, really love your stuff. I'd like to give you a copy of my book for free. You don't have to read it. You don't have to say anything about it. I just want to give it to you. And, it was kind of funny because he looked down at the book. He looked up at me. He looked back down at the book. He was like, is that a book? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, man, I don't even read the scripts they give me. How he learned his lines for the show, I have no idea. But he was like, I don't read books. I don't read scripts. But thank you anyway. It was a very funny moment. I imagine he wasn't being serious. But that's kind of emblematic of a lot of Hollywood, regardless of whether or not that was a joke. because a lot of people who do read the scripts, they don't really comprehend them, because the way that scripting formatting is, it's mostly dialogue, and the action is very short when you write in screenplay format. And so it can be difficult for people to envision what's happening. Whereas when you read a novel, sometimes, in novels, like, they take time to set the stage and kind of describe the scene and the characters, and they paint a picture in your head of what things are supposed to look like and be like and stuff like that. And so when you read a novel, a lot of those gaps are filled. But when you read a screenplay, the gaps are there intentionally, so like the director can come in and craft the visuals himself. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people have a hard time figuring out what's a good screenplay and what isn't. And you have certain screenwriters who actually take their craft seriously and figure out what it takes to write a good story and create good characters. But a lot of these good screenwriters are often overlooked because the people making the choices as to what gets made and stuff like that don't truly comprehend what it is they're reading. They're like, who's attached in terms of like the actor? If there's an A-list actor attached, it's to go. Is there any money attached? What's the marketability of this? Who's the demographic of this? Blah, blah, blah. And if the script hits all those notes, then they're like, okay, let's go forward with it. But whether or not it's a good story is kind of incidental to all the other stuff, because the people making the financial decisions usually look at it from a financial point of view as opposed to a quality point of view. It's very rare to have a Hollywood executive who understands good storytelling and the financial end of things. I think Kevin Feige is probably a good example of this, at least until recently. I mean, he's gone kind of woke lately, but I mean, we've yet to see kind of like what that, like how that's going to affect things, I think, in the long term. I think someone in chat actually said something about Loki a little bit earlier. Let me see if I can find this. Oh, Walter Bishop had a good comment here. Delenn from Babylon 5 was a strong female character without being physical, and was also really feminine. And this is a good point, Walter, because you can have feminine characters be very strong. You see this a lot in kind of like shows about royalty, shows about what's that that British writer, Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen. You see this in a lot of Jane Austen novels and stories, where the main female characters are extremely feminine, and the challenges that are put in front of them come from society and class, and the time period in which they live in, where women didn't have rights and were basically treated like property. And some of the more interesting characters, like if you look at Game of Thrones, Sansa's whole story is about her learning to harness her femininity to play the game, right? Because women just had a different set of tools with which to play the Game of Thrones with that men did. And one of the interesting things, and I'm talking about the books, I'm not talking about the TV show, because fuck that TV show. But Cersei in the books has that moment where she like, when we get into her chapters and we're seeing her thought process, she's always like, I should have been born a man. I'm more of a man than Tyrion is, or like whatever. And but that doesn't prevent her incompetent plans from backfiring on her. But in her head, she's a masculine character. Like, she's more of a man than most men are in her head. And they kind of went with that in the show, but they did it in a really stupid way. Regardless, the whole point that I'm trying to make is that, yes, Walter has a good point, is that femininity can be representative of a strong character. Motherhood is a great example of this. How many movies have we seen about single mothers trying to take care of their kids? And we totally relate to that. And we see the strength it takes to be a single mother. And, like Erin Brockovich, like that's a great example of a strong female character, overcoming obstacles, things of that nature. So, I mean, like, you don't have to masculinize a woman, female character, in order to make them strong. In fact, it's often more interesting to explore how feminine characters can be strong. Because if you think about it from an audience perspective, men are attracted to feminine traits. Men are attracted to characters who are feminine. So they get invested in the female characters. Women can relate to femininity, right? When a character's feminine, women can be like, yeah, I do that. I act like that. I can relate. So, having these kind of traditional gender roles can really help the audience connect to a character better than something that plays against those traditional gender roles. Now, that's not to say you can't ever, go against the grain. But when you do, you have to do it intelligently and you have to do it correctly. So that's a very good point, Walter. Thank you for that comment. I think there was something, I'm not finding it in chat, but there was something about Loki where they were talking about, I guess, Sylvie, Loki's female variant, which I think is an interesting character because a lot of people made a big deal about her being better than Loki and smarter than Loki. But if you look at her overall arc, she kind of fell into the trap of not being able to break out of the Loki mold. Like the whole thing about Loki was that no matter what he did, he'd always end up betraying the people closest to him. He was always kind of meant to be a villain, and so he'd even betray himself. When they were in that kind of bunker, and boastful Loki turned on young Loki, and Mayor Loki came in with his army of Lokis, and they all turned on each other. It was a very funny and entertaining scene, but it was also representative of Loki's big dilemma, which is that he's trapped in this loop of betrayal and stubbornness and unwillingness to change. And what made our Loki, the variant Loki, interesting was that throughout the course of the series, he was developing as a character. He was changing. He was going from the kind of self-centered villain that was in the first episode, and by the final episode, he was offered everything he wanted, basically control over all of reality, all of time. And he chose to turn it down because his priorities changed. He wanted to help this female version of himself. Essentially, he wanted to help himself. But it was an interesting character arc. But when it came to Sylvie, she fell into that trap of, I'm so focused on what I want, I will betray anyone who gets in my way. And so she ended up betraying the one person who was in her corner in order to get her revenge, because she wasn't after a throne, she was after revenge. And when she ultimately achieved that, she found out that it was hollow, and she was now alone. And you could see her despair at the end of that. So it was kind of like a tragic character arc. And that's what kind of made her interesting to me. It wasn't so much that like, oh, she was schooling Loki and this was like a pro-woman, anti-man thing. It was that this was her arc. Her arc was to be kind of self-centered, self-sufficient, on a quest for vengeance that nothing was going to get in the way of. And at the end of the day, it was a Pyrrhic victory. It was a victory at too great of a cost because, yeah, she may have gotten her revenge, but she screwed all of reality and she screwed herself in the process. And that to me makes interesting characters. And that's also a great kind of example of a series where obstacles are put in front of characters and they figure out ways to overcome them. Sometimes they got bailed out, like when they were on Terminus and the moon was crashing into the planet, and then all of a sudden more Mobius comes in and saves the day at the last minute. You can get away with that a little bit. Ideally, you always want your characters to figure out ways to save themselves, just so that they have a little bit more agency. But anyway, guys, I've gone an hour and a half now. I could probably talk about this for 4 hours or longer. But I think that we kind of covered all the big things. So I'm going to go to chat for maybe about 10 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, if you have any comments, I would love to hear them. And if we don't get any chats, I'll probably sign off and go about my day. I've got a lot of editing I have to do for the podcast. Matt Bader says, got to step away. Great stream, Matt. I'll be back soon-ish. Thanks for coming into the chat, Vader. Always love having you here, and I love hopping on your streams too. Kelly says, thank you for a great stream. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Kelly. I hope I didn't ramble too much. Sometimes like I said, I didn't have anything planned for today. If I sat down and kind of planned things out, I probably would have had a much more structured way of talking about writing strong female characters or strong characters in general. So I hope you guys kind of got something from my thought process on that. Whenever I sit down to write a character, I try to get to know the character as much as I can. I try to write like a backstory to them, even if that backstory is never revealed within the course of the story. I like to know who I'm writing about. And it also forces me to figure out, okay, how do I make this character likable? How do I make them strong? How do I make them a character I want to spend time with? And so that is that's my process. Nick says, what do you think about the female characters of Firefly? I will say this about Joss Whedon. I always want to call him Joss Whedon because of the Nordic pronunciation. But Joss Whedon does really well at writing female characters. His characters aren't Mary Sue's. They're characters that are flawed, and they struggle, and they're interesting. I liked Jewel State. I don't even know what the characters' names are in Firefly. It's been so long since I've watched them. Let me try to call them up on IMDb so I know what I'm talking about. IMDb, my best friend. I have such a terrible memory that I'm glad something like this exists so that I can reference it. Let's see here. Yeah, so Jewel State played Kylie Fry, who was she was like the engineer, I guess. She was the one who kept the ship running. And she was she was kind of like a tomboy, but she was also very feminine at the same time. And, she had a crush on the doctor and stuff like that. And so like I felt like she was a character who brought a lot of youthful energy and bubbliness to what could sometimes be a very very serious show. And then you have Gina Torres, who played Zoe Washburn, who's kind of like the tough chick mercenary. But when you saw her kind of like with Alan Tudyk's character Washburn, who was her husband or boyfriend, I forget which. It was probably her husband because they have the same last name. You got to see some traditional gender roles there where he wasn't someone who was emasculated. He was a little bit goofy, but that was kind of the thing that attracted her to him. And so like she was kind of like the strong, physically strong female character in the show, but she was also never like masculinized. You know what I mean? Like you could always tell that Gina Torres was playing it as a tough chick as opposed to a masculine woman. And then of course we have Monica Baccarin, who played Inara, who is the hush, stupid dog, who is the ship's companion. And she's just so classically beautiful, and that's a perfect example of a character who's uniquely feminine, and she uses her femininity as her power, as her weapon. So I really enjoyed her character and how she played off of Mal. And then we have Summer Glau, who is the crazy girl. She played River, who was the doctor's sister. And I always found her character kind of annoying because she didn't have a whole lot of agency, but like a lot of the stuff kind of like revolved around her. So she was my least favorite of the crew. But if you look at any Joss Whedon show, whether it be The Nevers or Buffy or Dollhouse or whatever, all the female characters in those shows are unique and interesting. And so like I really enjoy how he writes women because I guess he's the original feminist, right? Male feminist. Whatever you think of him personally, like separate the art from the artist. Like he is a good writer, in my opinion. You meeting for coffee Monday morning? I plan to stop by and say hello. I don't know because we're recording Monday morning this week, simply because Matt Vader had to work on Tuesdays, which is our normal recording time, so we pushed it up a day so that everyone could be in the studio. Took some good notes. Thanks, Matt. I'm glad that you got some notes out of it, Joker. I'll probably do more live streams like this where we talk about writing and crafting stories and stuff like that. I'm kind of struggling to figure out what I can bring to the table in terms of live stream, because you got amazing things like Doomcock and Nerdrotic, and they're excellent kind of critics where they can take a pop culture thing and break it down and talk about everything wrong with it, stuff like that. And I kind of don't want to repeat what they do, but I also don't want to be like a video game streamer because I'm not very good at video games. So I'm trying to think of what I can bring to the table. And this was an experiment to see, is there any interest out there from people who are interested in storytelling and writing and want to hear me talk about it. So I'm glad that you got something out of this. Hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but I do recognize you. R2 the Icky. Okay, R2 the Icky. R2. Hey, howdy. Thanks for coming by the stream. You're catching us at the tail end, but it's good to see you anyway. And yeah, okay, so last chance for anyone to ask any questions or anything like that. I don't believe in Twitter. You're not alone in that. However, I am a blue check mark, so I'm contractually obligated to use Twitter, just so you know. All right, guys. Well, I don't see any more in chat, but I want to thank all of you for tuning in and coming with me on this kind of rambling journey. I love all the action in chat. It was really fun interacting with you guys. I hope you choose to come back. I'm thinking about making this a regular thing. Ideally, we'd like to do it every day, but I might just start off by doing like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing. I know that Tom Connors from Midnight's Edge has asked me to come on their show in the mornings. So sometimes I might hop on over there. Just depends. But, me, Matt, or me, Vader, and Alex do want to do more live streaming just so, we can build an audience and build a community and have a good time with everyone. So let us know what you think about, us doing like a regular live stream in the mornings or something like that. And we'd love to hear from you. Nick says, I really like when you use your Hollywood experience to set matters straight and not tell us what we want to hear. Well, thank you. I don't know how to do it any other way. Sometimes I don't win a lot of friends or followers by kind of voicing my opinion. But, it's my experience, and I'm happy to share it with anyone who's willing to listen. And I really appreciate you, Nick, where, everything the Salty Nerd podcast does, you're always there supporting us. So we really appreciate that. R to the Icky. Sorry I missed the tail end, but I'll rewatch this later. Have a great weekend, Matt. Well, R2, don't forget, tomorrow is going to be Matt Vader's live stream. He's probably going to be playing video games again. I usually hop on there, at least on voice, so I can chit-chat with him while he's playing. I recently got this game called Crowfall, which I'd been waiting for like 5 years to come out. It's a PvP MMO. And I haven't had much time to play it. I hopped on briefly just to kind of go through the starter area. And I was thinking about maybe streaming that. But again, I'm so bad. I don't know how interesting it would be to watch me play Crowfall. But maybe I can get Vader to check it out and, kind of play it with him. So we shall see. Love Midnight's Edge. Yes, we all love Midnight's Edge. So I'm looking forward to getting on there. When I had my other gig, I was chained to my desk from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I didn't have time to get on live streams. And there were lots of times where Tom was inviting me on because he wanted to hear my thoughts on certain things, and I just couldn't do it, unfortunately. But now that I'm no longer doing that gig, I have a lot more free time. And so you might see me on Midnight's Edge a little bit more in the future. Is there a place I can send you samples of what I have written? I would like to hear your take. Joker, unfortunately, I have a policy where I don't read other people's stuff. It's just kind of like a general rule in the sense that I've been in situations before where other authors or other writers would accuse me of stealing their ideas or something like that. And, I want to be as helpful as I can to like read other people's stuff and comment on it and things of that nature. But just legally, because I'm a professional author and I write stuff, I don't want to be put in a situation where I could say, yeah, I read this person's stuff and my idea was similar to theirs. I didn't steal it or like whatever. So there is no place that I can recommend you send me a sample of what you've written because I don't read stuff from other people. Makes it kind of awkward when I'm networking with other authors because I'm like, oh, I haven't read your stuff because, I don't want to be accused of stealing from you. But maybe your best bet would be to turn it into a video in which I will watch. So that's a little bit easier to do. So get a Hollywood contract and go do that. And I'd be happy to give you a critique. I still need to play Alex's Jam Subnautica. Yeah, I think I prefer No Man's Sky to Subnautica. Subnautica doesn't look all that interesting to me, but I know Alex is big on it. He's also big on No Man's Sky. No worries. I just like to hang with you guys. Well, we like to hang with you too, R2. I appreciate you coming into the chat. Red Fox says, chill streams like this are great. I can put them on in the background while I work. You know what else you can put on in the background? The Salty Nerd Podcast. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we drop a new episode on Spotify or Apple iTunes or whatever. And they're long-form content, so they're usually an hour to 2 hours long. You can listen to them on your commute. You can listen to them while you're driving. If you're on YouTube and you go to Salty Nerd Video, which is the channel you're on right now, we put out a ton of content. We've got a lot of stuff in our back catalog that you can listen to. Someone the other day just asked if we had reviewed the movie Clue, which we did for my birthday last year. I did funny murder mysteries was the topic of the podcast. We did Clue, Murder by Death, and the Adam Sandler film Murder Mystery. And I had a lot of fun with those movies. My co-hosts hated them, if you can believe it. Both Matt Vader and Alex did not like Clue. Yeah, that tells you what their taste in movies are like. But we have so much stuff in our back catalog, especially on the podcasting end, like the audio only, where if you go to our Spotify channel or our Apple Podcast channel, you just look at like all the stuff we have from like the previous year. Like we were doing 3 episodes a week all last year and all this year. So we got a lot of stuff out there, which is great to listen to on the drive home or while you're working and doing stuff, and we have a lot of fun. We even have playlists. If you go to saltynerdplaylist.com, it'll take you to our website where we have links to our different playlists where you can like listen to like certain themes. Like we have a playlist for our top episodes where we had the most fun and the most laughs. We have playlists for like certain actors and certain series like Star Trek and stuff like that. So yeah, saltynerdplaylist.com. If you go there, you can find our little organized stuff for both video and audio. Let's see here. Fair enough from Joker. I'm looking for a new jam. I think you should keep playing FTL, Vader. Honestly, I love watching you play that game. It's slow paced. It's relaxed. It's fun. It's challenging. I really enjoy that. Let's see here. Clue is a great movie. The Play Dude 23, I agree with you. Clue's one of my all-time favorite movies. So much fun. I love it. All right, guys, as always, this is Matthew Kadish, producer of the Salty Nerd Podcast. If you haven't already, please give us a thumbs up because those thumbs up really help out with the YouTube algorithm. We also put out a brand new episode today. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we drop a main episode that we've recorded. Today's episode was Pirates of the Caribbean. We reviewed the first 3 movies, and these are one of Alex's favorite franchises, so he was very excited about it. And both he and Vader got really messed up on pirate hooch and shots of Bacardi 151. There's a point towards the end of our Dead Man's Chest review where Vader and Alex are just blitzed, and it's like Vader's basically using the microphone to support his face. He's trying to stay conscious. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, give us a thumbs up. Cost you nothing. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the stream, how often you think we should live stream, what time you think we should live stream, topics that we should live stream about. Join us tomorrow, Saturday. Saturday mornings are when Vader kind of takes over and he does the video game stuff. And yeah, just be sure to check out our YouTube channel. And if you'd be so kind, please recommend our podcast to people you know who might enjoy it, whether it be the audio version or the YouTube version. It's really easy. Just tell them to go to saltynerdpodcast.com if they want to listen to the audio. That's one of those things where depending on, like if you have an Android phone, it'll go to Spotify. If you have a Apple phone, it'll go to Apple Podcasts automatically. So if you just type that in, it'll take you to the your device's preferred podcast thing. And if you tell them to go to saltynerdvideo.com, it'll take them right to our YouTube channel. It's super easy. Also join us on Discord, saltynerddiscord.com. We'll get you an invite to our Discord where you can sit there and chat with us. Alex is on there a lot. He likes to do live video editing of the episodes while he's on Discord and all that good stuff. Let's see here. R to the Icky, take care, bud. I smashed the like button for you. Thank you, R2. That's fantastic. I appreciate that. No, how can you not love Clue and Murder by Death? I don't know. My co-hosts have very bad taste in movies. I think everyone knows this. And the Playdo 23, it was fun. Thank you. Looking forward to more of these. Well, I'm looking forward to doing these on a regular basis. Again, this was kind of like a test run just to see how it went. These last 2 hours have flown by. So I had a lot of fun doing these, and I'm glad that you guys all came and participated in the podcast, or the live stream, I should say. All right, guys, thank you so much. This is Matthew Kadish, and I will catch you all next time. Peace out. Bye.